Welcome to Purple Rose Crafts. Today we're going to learn how to make this granny striped blanket. Now I've actually done just a small swatch here of our granny stripes just to kind of give you guys an example of what you can do with the granny stripes. But it is a very simple crochet pattern where you can use any multiple of 3 stitches. So you can do 51, you can do, 127, whatever it works out to be, however wide you want your blanket to be. You make a multiple of 3 stitches and then add 2 stitches at the end for your turning double crochet. Okay, so right now what we've done is we've actually done this really cute purple and pink pattern. It is 4 rows of purple and 2 rows of pink. I did our first initial 3 rows of pink, but it really doesn't matter. So I mean, I can add another row of pink at any point if I want to and kind of make it that kind of intentional adjustment to the pattern, or it can be completely random. I can add 5 rows of pink at this point and really make it kind of more of a random stripe. So but this is just a swatch, so it's really just an example of what anyone can do. You can do just 1 row of each color if you wanted, and it really does look really beautiful to do like a rainbow blanket that way. I've seen lots of examples where you use, say, primary colors and just stay with the rainbow and just switch colors every single row, and it really is just so beautiful. When you do just 1 row or an odd number of rows, you're going to end up actually having to cut off your yarn because it won't be on the same finishing side as the one that you started on and the one where the rest of your yarn might be collecting. So if you can see here, I have 2 strands of yarn, my purple that we had finished previously and the pink that we're just finishing now. And we're gonna switch back to our purple. So what I've actually done here is, you can see along the side, I just carry my yarn up the side of my blanket. Now, honestly, it won't be seen once we're finished the blanket and actually add a couple of border rows. It'll get crocheted right into the side of the blanket. So we'll never see it. So it's completely fine if you carry your yarn up the side of the blanket like we have done here. Okay, so let's switch back over to our purple. Now, what I typically do is I will cinch down my chain from the previous color so we can't see it anymore, and it will disappear into our previous stitch. So now we're going to chain 2 our granny stripes. When we do a multiple of 3 stitches, we want to actually have the ends of our row have about a half of a cluster. So in this case, we have 1 single, just 1 double crochet. I hope you can see that here on the end of the row, but at the beginning of the row, sorry, if we were working in this direction, we have our 2 chains and then 1 double crochet. So that's kind of like our other half of our cluster. Okay, now granny clusters usually have 3 double crochets in them, and they're worked into the spaces between clusters from the previous row. So that's what we're going to continue doing. So when we chain our multiple of 3, we are going to add our 2 chains for the turning for the second row, and then we're going to do our first double crochet into the space. When we're working with an initial chain row, you're going to double crochet into the 3rd chain from the hook. Okay, now I'm not showing that here because we're already working on this blanket being a little bit larger, or this swatch being a little bit larger, but that's typically where you would start your cluster. And then you're going to skip 2 stitches and work into the next chain. Now I can show you that. All right, so here we go. I have started a chain. In this case, because again, it's just a small swatch, I've chained 22 stitches, or sorry, it should be 23 stitches. So I've changed 23 stitches, a multiple of 3. We're gonna have 7 clusters, and then we need our 2 for the turning double crochet. So now we're gonna yarn over and insert our hook into the 3rd chain from the hook. So not this one here is the first one, then we have 2, and then there's the 3rd here. So we're going to insert our hook here and then draw up our loop, and then it's a double crochet, so we're going to finish with our double crochet stitch. Now we're going to skip 2 stitches, which is not this one because this is the one that our double crochet is in, so we want this one is the first, the second, and now over here is our 3rd stitch. in this one, we're going to put 3 double crochets. 1. And if you are unsure of how to do the double crochet, see the description below, because there is a link to a video that explains exactly how to do each individual stitch, including that chain row that I started with. And all right, so there's our 3 double crochets. Now we're going to continue skipping 2 stitches and then putting 3 more double crochets until we get to the end of the row. So just a moment and I will be back and show you what we're going to do at the end of the row. All right, so now here we are at the end of our row. We have our 2 at the beginning, then we have 6 clusters, and then we've actually split the last, the 7th cluster into a half on either end of the row. So we have 2 stitches at the beginning of the row. Our chain 2 counts as one of those, and now we actually have these extra 2 chains at the end, which we're going to actually finish with just a double crochet, just one single one. And that's going to give us our nice straight end of the row. Now here we're going to chain 2 again. Typically, if you were going to, you can change color at any point. You can, change colors in a specific pattern. It's completely up to you, but we're just going to use the plain blue at this point and just keep going. Okay. So now we have our first double crochet as our chain 2. Now our second double crochet is going to go into the space between the 2 cluster, or the double crochet and the cluster that we have here. Okay. So we've turned our work around and now we're going to work into the space. So we're just going to do 1 more double crochet because we want to keep things nice and straight. So because we have a half of a cluster at the beginning and end of the row, it's going to give us a nice straight edge. Okay, so this is how we keep our edges straight when we're doing this granny stripe. And now we're going to jump over, skip the cluster itself and go into the space between the 2 clusters and double crochet into there 3 times. So we're going to continue with our clusters, working across our row, and we work them each into the chain, into the space between the clusters from the previous row. Now you'll notice that I did crochet over. If you can see here, when we pull our clusters apart, we actually have our chain here at the top, which is the end of our double crochet here, but we also have the 3rd loop from the rest of the yarn as we work it along. So I typically actually crochet over that. So I will go directly into the space and go over top of that loop. Now you don't have to do that. I just like the way that it looks a little bit better than if I weren't to do that. So let's see here. I'll show you on the next one what it looks like if we don't crochet over top, and then you can make your own decision as to what you think looks best when you do it. The only thing, as I've said in previous videos, is be consistent. Decide on one way to do it and then always do it that way. Okay. It's okay to change your mind, but don't change it mid-blanket. Okay. You will notice. You might not notice right away. And honestly, the mistakes that I have in some of my work are typically things like that, where I didn't realize what I was doing and then changed it midway through a pattern, and it was noticeable to me afterwards. If you're giving it to someone who doesn't knit or crochet, they probably wouldn't even notice the mistake, but for me, I will definitely see it every time. So there you go. That's the difference between working over that piece of that part of the work versus leaving it alone or working over top. See how you kind of have that loop here? That kind of splits up the bit of the cluster space. I don't typically like the way that looks. So I will often work it the way that I did this one here. All right, so we're going to go back and go over top of it. And again, when we get to the end of the row, we're going to do 1 double crochet into the final space and then chain 2 to turn our work around. Okay. And at the beginning of the work, you could work a 2nd double crochet into the space between the chain between the double crochet at the end of the previous row and the cluster at the end of the previous row. Okay. So we're going to do that again here in just a moment. And then we're going to continue working up our swatch in that exact same fashion. So when we work with multiples of 3 plus 2 stitches for the turning chains, that gives us that nice even row when we work each row. So every row is the same. It's going to be, and start with the second double crochet. So chain 2 counts as 1, and then double crochet into the space. So there's our clusters. So the beginning of the row, we've got our chain 2, double crochet at the beginning, clusters across, and then finishing cluster into the last space, double crochet into the chains from the beginning of the previous row. Okay, like that. Okay, so now we kind of have like a half cluster here, and then we have just a single there, just a single double crochet. So now we do our chain 2, turn our work around, and now we're going to work into the space again. Okay, making our second double crochet. Okay, and then we continue working into our spaces. I hope that makes a lot of enough sense for you. Feel free to go back, rewind the video, pause it at certain points if you need clarification, or check out the initial videos where we talk about the double crochets and any of my previous granny square videos, especially the intro to granny squares and the intro to the granny square blanket. It's a little bit different when we're working in the stripes because we need to end a row, right? Whereas when we worked in our granny squares, we ended at the end of the circle. Each row was a circle. So in this case, we have to figure out how to do an edge and what happens in that case. I'm going to come back in a couple, probably in another couple of videos. We're going to talk about how to attach our granny squares together, which we've done in a couple of previous videos as well. And we're going to talk about borders. So I actually might expand this blanket and we might put some borders on it and see exactly how that looks. All right, so that's it for this video. It should be nice and quick for you to kind of get going into this granny square blanket pattern. So tag us in your Instagram posts, okay? And we'll share those to our stories. I want to see everything that you guys are creating from our videos, okay? Thanks so much for hanging out with us.